Welcome to Don't Give Up on Testicular Cancer, a podcast where testicular cancer survivors, caregivers, and others who have navigated the cancer journey share their stories. The podcast comes to you from the Max Mallory Foundation, a nonprofit family foundation focused on educating about testicular cancer in honor and in memory of Max Mallory, who died in 2016 at the young age of 22 from testicular cancer. Had he survived, Max wanted to help young adults with cancer. This podcast helps meet that goal. Here now is your host, Joyce Lofstrom, Max's mom and a young adult cancer survivor.
Mark Vidic learned he had testicular cancer at age 43, an age several doctors told him was too old for this cancer. However, as we all know, cancer doesn't pay much attention to age. Mark will share more about his diagnosis and treatment at the Princess Margaret Cancer Center in Toronto, Canada. To keep going, he relied on his resilience and discipline as a martial arts instructor. His positive attitude worked. Mark and his wife, Christine, are expecting another child conceived a little over a year after Mark completed his chemotherapy. He joins us today to share his story of testicular cancer and why men need to pay attention to their bodies. So, Mark, thanks so much for being here with me.
Thank you so much, Joyce. Very, very grateful that you asked me to be part of the podcast, and I'm absolutely honored to continue and sharing my story and then continue your son's legacy. Thank you very
Well,
much.
thank you. So, I really want to start with your work as a martial arts instructor before we get into your testicular cancer story. Just tell us a little bit about this expertise and what you do.
Yeah, I do have a day job, and that's not what we're going to talk about. But there's a term in Japanese called ikigai, and literally the translation is your reason for being.
Hmm.
And there's no rule around how many you can have. You can have several. In my case, and so relevant to our conversation, it's my martial art and it's my family, and specifically the martial art that I do. It's called Combat Ju-Jitsu. Originated about 1,000 years ago in Japan among the samurai, and then it was brought into Great Britain by a traveling teacher, and then it became British Jiu-Jitsu. It was taught to my instructor that was actually a U.S. Army Ranger and served 2 tours in Vietnam, and then joined the Toronto Police SWAT team. So over the years, it became, call it, adapted for military and law enforcement use. But I've been studying it since I was 13 years of age, and really, you couldn't have put it better. It taught me really resilience in the face of pressure. It's taught me discipline. It's really taught me, to a certain degree, about spirituality and really to listen to my body, understand, when things don't seem right, and really to be mindful around things like that. Absolutely.
That sounds wonderful. I'm just starting to learn about more about mindfulness. I think that's great. So let's switch over to testicular cancer and tell us your story. I know it took a while to get your diagnosis, and several doctors said you were too old. What happened?
Yeah, actually, it didn't. It was just funny the premise how it all came about. So, and we'll go back to actually this time 2 years ago, and even 6 months before that. So, I've always been pretty good at seeing my GP for annual, biannual checkups, and the last one was in November of, I guess it would have been 23. Nothing was found at that time, and that did include a testicular exam. Anyway, fast forward 6 months into spring, I decided I wanted to take up running. And again, it's one of those things, putting myself into an area of discomfort and then finding comfort in it by challenging myself through something physical. Anyway, I started running quite a lot from April onwards through spring into summer. And it was within, probably a couple of months where I started to develop a lower back pain.
Mm.
I started seeing a chiropractor. and it provided relief, albeit temporary. And over the course of seeing the chiropractor, I felt pain in my lower back on my left side and even this tight muscles in my shoulders. And we started talking about something called thoracic outlet syndrome, which is kind of like almost like a whiplash to
Mm,
describe it in simple terms. And, over the course of my martial arts career, I've been thrown probably 40,000 times.
mm,
And it's, you kind of giggle about it. I'm like, okay, I guess it's caught up with me, right? But going through summer with this treatment, and then towards the end of summer, it was mid August, where in a self exam in the shower, I actually felt a lump,
mm.
and I think it was probably on like a Friday, and immediately I spoke to my wife, and I said, you know what? I'm going to give it a couple of days and go through the weekend, and I'm sure you've heard this a million times before. I'm going to hope it goes
Yeah,
away. And you hit Dr. Google and you start reading about all the things that it can't be, and you find some reassurance in that. And then the next week rolls around and the lump didn't go away, and it was probably about the size of a pea. And then I went to a walk-in clinic, and the doctor confirmed at the walk-in, yeah, it's definitely a lump, and had me do some urine analysis and gave me a requisition for an ultrasound. That same week, later on in the week, I went to see my GP, who also said, "Yeah, this is a lump," and that's when the term was used. You're 43. You're too old for this. Like, it shouldn't be testicular cancer. That's a young man's
yeah.
disease. Was my doctor's were actually the words that she used. And she went in so far as, have you been exposed to radiation or anything like that? And, that certainly wasn't the case. Anyway, ultrasound was done, did some blood work, which, notably showed no abnormal hormone levels in the week following. So, from about October 23rd, and you might hear stories about the speed at which the medical system moves in Canada, but
Mhm.
August 23rd to September 6th, which I consider quite quick. I was in touch with a urologist. I was sat in his office, and he said the same thing to me. You're a little bit old for this, and we don't know what it is yet at this point, but we're not sure if it's cancer. And I'm like, great. So what do we do next? And he's like, well, we still need to perform an orchiectomy.
Yeah.
At which time I said, great. You give me a
Get
stick
rid
to
of it,
bite,
right?
give me a stick to bite down on, and let's do it right now. And we kind of laughed about it and said, well, I wish everyone kind of came at this with the same outlook that you have, but we'll certainly get it done quickly. And a week later, it was Friday, the 13th of September, underwent left orchiectomy. And I will say, so that thoracic outlet pain and that lower back pain stopped immediately following that surgery,
Wow. Okay.
which is wild. I
Yeah.
find that absolutely wild. And I mention that only because I think that was my body kind of in that first sign where something felt off, right?
Yeah.
So we performed some more scans, notably CT scans, on the 3rd of October, and found some enlarged lymph nodes. And that's when I was referred to the Princess Margaret, which is a premier cancer hospital in Toronto, probably even Canada. And I had a consult with them on the 11th of October. I met with a wonderful team, including a chemo oncologist, including a surgeon as well, Dr. I believe Robert Hamilton, who I think among a lot of testicular cancer circles and online, he's quite well known.
Okay.
We sat down and we had this consult, and it turns out what I had was pure embryonal carcinoma, which is the same testicular cancer as Lance Armstrong,
Okay.
except I was 20 years older. And then they basically said your options are chemotherapy, and then we'll start with that. And if there's a need, or PLND surgery. And my mom actually passed of a different kind of cancer in 2020, and I saw the effects of chemotherapy and the impact that it had on her. And I got into this, Joyce, frightened,
Oh, yeah.
absolutely frightened of chemo, to the degree where I said, no, I'm not doing chemo. We're doing surgery. And they said, well, we can do that, but your odds of getting everything via surgery and not needing chemo afterwards are very slim. Whereas if we start with chemo, the odds of needing surgery afterwards are quite slim as well. You're better off starting with the chemo. So I went home to mull it over. My At the time, my wife and I, we weren't married, and we had a destination wedding booked a month later. And I sat down in front of her and I said, we're not canceling this wedding.
Yeah.
It'll have to wait until afterwards. And she said, Mark, are you crazy? You call them back. That can wait.
Wow.
So
Okay.
yeah.
That's
Oh yeah.
huge. Wow.
Yeah. October 11th was that consult. I think on the 18th, they rushed me in to do some sperm banking, and then chemo began on the 28th of October.
And so how many
Uh,
rounds of chemo did you have?
so that was one round, 3 cycles, about 90 days of chemo. I rang the bell on Christmas Eve, 2024.
Wow.
And I'm
That's
happy
right.
to
Yeah.
say, yeah, that I'm NED since.
So if I can ask, what happened with the wedding? So did you get to reschedule it? I'm being nosy. If you don't want to talk.
Oh no,
Yes.
I love talking about this stuff, and we got married in November of this past year. So we
Okay.
finally made it out to our destination wedding. We were surrounded by, I think, 35 of our closest family and friends, in the sunny Caribbean, and we got there, and
Yeah.
it meant the world to all of us. It really did.
You have a wonderful partner that kind of knew what you had to get done with the chemo and your health.
I
So,
sure do. I surely do.
that's great. So you got through the chemo and then just that's just been what, a year ago? How long ago? That's not been.
Yeah, so that wrapped up in December of 2024. 2 weeks later, I still had, the shiny head and no facial hair and none of
Mm,
that stuff. But 2 weeks later, I was back in the dojo practicing martial arts. February, for men's health, and specifically for men's mental health, I participated in a 2,000 push up for the month fundraiser, and then a Canadian Cancer Society run the month following. And I've just been kind of working on
yeah.
getting back to it since, getting
Yeah.
back to my fitness and really a good, comfortable state.
Yeah. That's great. So I know I read an article, more than one, about you. There's a quote in this article that actually came from the cancer center, and it said, and I will quote here, became your treatment became more about showing up for your family and helping others through their treatment. So kind of elaborate on that. What does that mean, or how did that come to be for you?
Yeah, in treatment, I remember being sat in the waiting room for the call it when you go in before you get assigned to your pod. You
Yeah.
meet with the nurses, they take your weight and all that good stuff. And I'd see a couple of young men, and they seem to know one another clearly through treatment, and they chat, and they're friendly. And I introduced myself and started talking about them and or what they were there for, what I was there for, and really we found that we were there for commonality.
Yeah.
Testicular cancer was really what brought us together, and we got to know one another. And the thing that hits you, and you come there with, you try to come into that day with the best attitude that you can. But what really resonated with me with some of these young men is how potentially frustrated they were. In some cases, they were there, for their second or third cycle, and then in other cases, I'm talking to these young men about the hardships, the tolls that this has taken on their personal relationships,
Mhm.
and just frustrated with their partners, and not knowing whether they will be able to have kids, or even before that, if I need RPL&D surgery, and there's a risk of nicking a nerve, uh, the impact that'll have on my fertility, and so many things, and it just kind of slaps you on the face. And of course, these were topics that meant something to me as well. They were important to me and that they could impact me. But it really occurred to me that among my wife and my daughters, and already having kids, and a partner that drove me to every single chemo treatment, and it was there, to kind of coach me through it and help me out. And she's also a part-time yoga instructor, so getting home and when you want to crumple onto the couch absolutely exhausted, she'd say, hey, why don't you go for a walk or get on the elliptical or come and do some yoga, come and do some breath work. You know, just having that support system was so huge. And it hurt me to see when others didn't have
Yeah.
that. So I would try to make fun out of things that we would deal with on a daily basis. And, like we get there for chemo timed around the same days and the same times. And I'd see them down in the lobby and they'd hop into the elevator and I'd say, guys, I'm going to take the stairs up and it's 4 floors up and I'll race you. Right. So we'd have a laugh out of it. And I got them using the stairs as well. And got them trying to challenge themselves a little bit and get comfortable with the uncomfortable. And
Right,
I
right.
think that's really what I mean by, really turning up, not just for yourself, but for those around you. And in my case, certainly my spouse and my daughters who are just, wonderful to support me the way that they did through the whole thing, and then even other young men on the program. And it's really important to me that the story gets told, that everyone's story gets told, just so that anyone knows dealing with something like this, going through treatment, just so that they know that really they aren't alone.
Right. That's very important, and I like what you said, to make the uncomfortable comfortable, right?
You bet.
Uh, um,
Absolutely.
so I know you're expecting your 4th child, what, September, is that right?
That's
Um,
right. It's
um,
September the 19th and a
well,
little boy.
okay, I have the 3 girls, that's fun too, I think. But tell me,
Sure.
because a lot of the men, like you mentioned, they worry about their fertility, you bank sperm, or can you talk about what you did? Did you bank
Yeah.
sperm, or what'd you
So
do?
we did bank sperm, and we were in touch with Sinai Fertility Clinic up here. And several months after completing chemo, we did want another child, and we started trying naturally and unsuccessfully, and meeting and having consultations with the fertility clinic. And they said this is absolutely normal. Everyone's body's different, and everyone's ability to bounce back is different. And of course, in my head at 44, turning 45, one at that age working against me. At this stage, I have one testicle. What is the likelihood of this happening? And they said anything can happen. We don't know at this point. Everyone's different. So
Yeah.
we went with it. And we kept trying and submitted to several semen analyses just to kind of figure out what was going on. And the results that came back every time were subfertile,
Mm.
subfertile. And really, we got to the point in our discussion where they said, if you don't want to wait any longer, we'll have to look at IVF or IUI or really some of those other methods, which we weren't opposed to, and that's why we went through the sperm banking. But something just happened around. We do have access up in Canada and in Ontario to funding for a
Right.
cycle of IVF. So, this was offered to us and it was really, we were really at the end of this offer period where the clinic was looking for a yes or a no from us. And Christine and I spoke and we just kind of said, or I asked her, I said, can we try just until summer? I don't know what it is. I would be more comfortable if we just tried a little bit. And my biggest concern was the injections, the hormones,
Yeah.
all the stuff that she would have to go through to get ready for this process. And I didn't want her to go through that having just gone through all the chemo, the
Yeah.
injections
No,
and all that stuff. I know there's nothing pleasant about it. And she said, you know what? Let's wait until summer and let's see what happened. And around the same time, my father was in a nursing home, had Parkinson's and
mm,
really at the end of his life and transferred to hospital really in his last days. And we sat with him at the beginning of January. And I said to him, and at this point, he was very much in a comatose phase. And I said, look, Dad, I don't know who's on the other end, who you're going to see, if it's someone sat on a cloud and
right.
whatever. But
Yeah.
put in the good word. We want another child. Let's see where that goes. And actually, believe it or not, he squeezed my hand and I got a little smile out of him. So
Really? Oh, that's wonderful.
yeah, whether it's coincidence or whether it was, he heard and there was a reaction. It was a beautiful thing. And I love that's, kind of one of the last moments that we shared. But it turns out even during that discussion, Christine was already pregnant.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's
So
great. Wow.
So naturally, and yeah, she's progressing well. I think she's in week 20 this week, and we're all really, really excited. The older sisters are all excited to have a little bit brother, little brother, and mom and dad couldn't be happier as well. So,
Wow, that's great.
to anyone under the circumstances, anything is possible. I've said it several times in my life. Tell me what I can't do so that I can show you that I can. And
That's
and
good.
I
I like
I
that
think
too.
this
Yeah.
rings true.
Well, that's kind of a good segue into what's going on Father's Day on June 21st. You're part of this, the Cancer Center journey. What is that?
Yeah, so Princess Margaret is the hospital where I was treated, and they have several walks during the year, and Journey, I believe, is their new one, which happens on Father's Day, and it's a fundraiser, really to fundraise for new treatments, for breakthrough treatments, and it was my wife and my daughters that actually found it
Mm,
and presented it to myself and said, "Hey, how do you feel about spending Father's Day doing this?" And my response back was, I couldn't think of anything more wonderful or more important. I can't thank that hospital enough. Christmas passed, we went out as a family and we brought treats and donuts to the nurses on all of the pods, something I intend on doing every year as long as I can. But to be able to help them out, to be able to help out people in need through this event or any other is something that I hold dear. So the girls suggested it. We have registered our team. Our team is named It Takes Balls,
mm.
and certainly we hope that we can make an impact through some fundraising and for being there for the event.
That's great. That's a really nice that you have your family behind it and working with you on it and going back to the nurses. And I think that's great. So you've been very open about what happened to you with testicular cancer and you want to talk about it. What would you tell men just about taking responsibility for or paying attention to their own health?
Yeah, there's probably two things, and the first, listen to your body, and I know people are like, okay, well, what does that mean?
Yeah.
It's a loaded statement, and it is, and in my case, and to run the parallel back to martial arts, um, you get to know what feels normal, what's within your ability, what's not within your ability. Like in my case, it's quite funny. I used to joke with the nurses because I'd sit down and they put the blood pressure cuff on me, and in the martial art that I do, as soon as you grab my arm, my fight or flight response kicks off. So putting the blood pressure cuff on me, my blood pressure
Oh,
starts to get
yeah.
elevated, and I joke with them. I go, this kind of gives me a bit of white coat, and I can actually feel my blood pressure when it goes up or when it's particularly low. But to go back to the original statement, listen to your body.
Yeah.
If something doesn't feel right, if it starts with lower back pain, if it starts with even a shoulder pain that didn't exist before, or you're not sure why, or anything for that matter, even if it's something obvious like a lump, speak to someone. Don't just look it up and hope that it goes away. And I've listened to a few of your podcasts prior to you and I sitting down and speaking, and it it really warmed my heart to hear that people took action quickly.
Yeah.
And I think that is absolutely key. And proof in that is the fact that I had the physical with my doctor in November. And then come spring, a couple months later, 6 months later, all of a sudden went from no lump to a pea-sized, something quite large. This can move quickly,
Yeah.
and that's scary. The second that something doesn't feel right, get medical help.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then the second bit of advice is do hard things. And whether that's martial arts, whether that's running, whether that's anything that takes you outside of your comfort zone, doing tough things really builds resilience. And I think certainly in my journey through chemotherapy, it was that resilience that got me up at the end of the cycle. It got me home and got me on the elliptical to really sweat, get the chemotherapy drugs moving through my system, the walking. And, forgive me for using the metric system, but I would try to walk even 8, 9 kilometers a day through chemotherapy just to
That's
keep moving, to fight the fatigue. Do hard things whenever you can, build that strength, build that inner resilience. I love my stoic quotes, and iron needs to be beaten and burned before it becomes a sword, right? So, that is really part of that journey.
if you can do that exercise, I think you're absolutely right because it helps your body heal. It helps you mentally, and yeah, I think that's very good advice. So,
And I think in one of your last podcasts, actually, there's a gentleman that was a physiotherapist
mhm,
who was speaking to that. And I think just now they're speaking to the benefits of exercise
yeah,
during this kind of treatment, and how really it acts both as a support physically, but mentally as well.
it does. So what's next for you in life? I know the baby probably, but anything you want to share about, life, your job, giving back to
Yeah,
cancer?
yeah. I mean, I just want to make a difference. I'm just a guy with a story, but I try to participate in online men's groups through social. If ever there's a young man that needs support, someone to drive them to chemotherapy if they don't have someone to cut their hair, frankly, if there's some kind of level of discomfort or anxiety around that, just someone to listen to them. I just want to help, and if I can make a difference in one person's life, I think I've done a decent job. So I don't know what that is. I'm certainly open to it. Certainly my commitment to be involved is not going to waver in the long term.
Well, what you said about having support and talking, like what you did with the two young men that were having chemo when you were, I think that's really valuable and important because I know with Max, I remember, he was the youngest person, in the lobby at the hospital, and a lot of his treatment was out of state, so he didn't have his friends around to come and visit. And I mean, there's things like that you don't think about until you go through it. And what you did with those two young men, I think, is outstanding, and it gave them, like you said, something to aspire to, like running up the steps or having I mean, it sounds minimal, but I don't think it is. I think it's really makes a big difference, and
Thank
how
you.
you
And
get
and
through it.
and I do think I made a bit of a difference, how their treatment journey went. We keep in touch on occasion now, but like throughout, I live by Lake Ontario here, and we've got some beautiful views of the lake, some beautiful sunsets. So I get out, I take a picture, I send it to them. What are you guys doing? Get out, move around a little bit, little things like that, really just to promote that activity and that challenge. And last I spoke to these two guys, and I think of them frequently. They were NED, and I hope that continues for all of us.
Yeah. So my last question is, what song, when you hear it, do you have to sing along?
And this one is my favorite. And going
Ugh,
through your email and the questions, I had so many racing through my head. But there's an English band called the New Radicals,
okay.
and the song is "You Get What You Give." And I encourage anyone to look it up, hop on Skype, check it out, listen to the lyrics, look up the lyrics. But really, it talks about persevering when things seem tough around you. They'll get better, and certainly you get out of things what you put into them.
Yeah. That sounds like a great song. I will look it up because I don't know it. So,
So,
um, but thanks for your time and telling us your story and what you're doing. I'm glad you are healthy, and you may have to come back and tell us about your new baby, maybe in a few months, and what's going on. So,
Joyce, I've got all the time in the world for you.
okay, no, it'd be great. So, thanks, and enjoy Father's Day.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
Be well. Bye now.
Thank you for watching this episode of Don't Give Up on Testicular Cancer. If you enjoyed this podcast, please subscribe to our program on your favorite podcast directory. You can also visit the Max Mallory Foundation at www.maxmalloryfoundation.com/podcast to listen to previous podcast episodes or donate to the foundation. Join us again next time for another episode of Don't Give Up on Testicular Cancer.